Our theme this month is the dynamic laws of healing, and today's topic is step one is stir it up. For those of you who are familiar with the writings of Catherine Ponder, you already know that this is the title of one of her books, and that book was first published in 1966, and this one kind of looks like it's a first edition, doesn't it? It's had a lot of attention over the years. You may also know that Reverend Ponder is a minister in Unity Church, and at the age of 92, she continues to minister from her enclave in Palm Desert in California. Dr. Ponder writes the Unity Church Worldwide newsletter every month, and it's titled Keys to Prosperity. And she's been doing this since 1973. It includes a monthly message and then letters from her readers on their success from using her teachings. The newsletter goes out to thousands of people all over the world, and she receives hundreds of letters every week about the demonstrations that her readers have experienced from her books. They send in prayer requests for additional help in their everyday lives. And she is also on Facebook and generates podcasts, which are accessible on the internet. And through the years, I have frequently referred members of my centers to her writing on chemicalization, which is a healing process. Some of you have been introduced to that process as well through classes and through counseling. But I've only made occasional reference to it in my talks until now. This month, I'm going to be focusing on how the concept of chemicalization is always present in the process of healing anything. Chemicalization is a metaphysical term. However, from a scientific viewpoint, it might be likened to the process of alkali neutralizing an acid. Millard Fillmore, who was the founder of Unity, described it this way. He said, whenever a new spiritual idea is introduced into the mind, some negative belief is going to be disturbed. It resists. And with this resistance comes more or less commotion in the consciousness. And this is called chemicalization. So what does this have to do with you? Or with me? Or with us as spiritual beings having a human experience? Why, some might ask, have I lived my whole life until now without knowing anything about or understanding chemicalization? And what does it have to do with my practice of the science of mind? Or my faith and my trust in spiritual mind treatment, positive thinking, and what I call my source of being, God? Well, here's how Catherine Ponder explains that. In chemicalization, a situation worsening is actually a part of its improvement. When people begin to practice right thinking, there's a clash between the old ways and the new ways. And consequently, this sets up a negative chemical reaction in the body, in the mind, and in the affairs of those experiencing it. The dominant negative thought patterns that actually live in the subconscious, such as strong fears, willfulness, prejudice, jealousy, resentment, they get stirred up. These old emotions have been in place for so long that they don't want to give up without a fight. Chemicalization is uncomfortable, but it's a natural and positive process. If you don't panic or try to resist the process, you get through it a lot easier, a lot faster, and something higher and better always results. So be grateful when this happens. Think of it as kind of a spring cleaning. And I want to add that as we go through this month's exploration of this, because we're going to, this process occurs in the healing of mental, emotional, and spiritual challenges, not just physical ones. Because sometimes there's the belief that healing is unique to and or specific only to physical illness or injury. So this is a reminder that healing is just as present and just as powerful in those other areas of our life experiences. You've often heard it said that things have to get worse sometimes before they get better. Almost like a declaration that describes the inevitable, isn't it? It's important to us, though, to know that what looks like getting worse is actually a part of the improvement process, that what seems like failure is actually success being born in the situation. Remember spring cleaning when you find this unfolding. Remember a few moments ago I made reference to the term chemicalization is being likened to the process of alkali neutralizing acid. That one of the substances neutralizes the other and sometimes brings better results from the action is the reality of this. And when we begin to look at it that way, then we begin to get the big picture. And this is exactly what happens in our minds and our bodies when we begin to deliberately practice the dynamics of right thought. A chemical change literally takes place in our bodies, in our thoughts, and in our feelings. And that continues to be reflected in our body as well as in our affairs. Hence the title of today's talk, Stir It Up, which is step 1 in the 4-step process of healing in Ponder's treatise on chemicalization. The first step, she explains, occurs when you start reading, studying, denying limitation, affirming greater good for your life. Well, that sounds pretty good to me. How about you? I'm developing my practice of science of mind. I'm growing my faith and my trust in spiritual mind treatment, positive thinking, what I call my source of being, God. Then, as the saturation of these ideas sets in, then comes the stirring up of the old ideas, the old opinions, the old relationships, the old health problems, the old financial affairs, the memories of past unhappiness, or you fill in the blanks. You may have some additions to add to that. At this point, some people just stop. They just stop reading. They stop studying. They stop affirming greater good. They stop denying limitation. Why? Why do they stop their good unfolding? Because the stirring up is uncomfortable. They stop because the stirring up is uncomfortable. Now, truth be known, the chances are very good that their life was uncomfortable before they started stirring it up. That's why it is so important to allow and to welcome the good unfolding in our lives and continue going through this cleansing process, which leads to a life of vast improvement. In Science of Mind, as you know, we refer to this as releasing, letting go of the old, in order to make room for the new. The new that we affirm as our greater good in a life that is leading to vast improvements in every area. In Ponder's description of this first step, stir it up, in chemicalization, she urges us, first of all, not to panic. Instead, she urges us to rejoice, to be thankful and accept that a deep cleansing is taking place, which is the first step toward greater good. Meet it peacefully and non-resistantly, she says, and say to yourself, none of these things move me, and this too shall pass. As you continue to study and to affirm the good, in this way you become the victor of, rather than the victim to, chemicalization. Well, we all know somebody, or maybe have been that somebody, who initially began studying or practicing a religious or a spiritual path only to back away from it, telling themselves, and often those around them, this just doesn't work for me, or I have my own ways of doing this. And assuming that what that person does or doesn't do results in an ongoing life of joy, prosperity, and peace, then their approach is right and perfect for them. You sitting in this room this morning, and those who are listening to this talk on YouTube, those of you taking our classes, have discovered that what we thought, or what we call new thought, metaphysics, spiritual equilibrium, I love that phrase. I just pawned that from Dr. Ponder. Spiritual equilibrium. Recognize the value of freeing yourself from old ways of thinking and living so that the demonstrations evolving from experiencing chemicalization bring new patterns of good into your life. And in this moment, know that this morning's discussion on Stir It Up is only the first step in a 4-step process. Obviously, what has been presented here is clearing the way for the next parts of this journey in enlightenment. In her chapter on chemicalization from the book, The Dynamics of Healing, Ponder shares that she once gave a series of 4 lectures on chemicalization, and they were spaced a week apart. Within those 4 weeks, she said, everybody attending the lectures had some kind of a reaction. More things got straightened out for more people in that short length of time than in any other comparable period of lectures that she could recall. And she said there was so much excitement in the process of how quickly and how completely these unfolded. Well, what that says to me is that our understanding of the logical steps in acknowledging that we still have some work to do on our thoughts and our behaviors, developing a way of releasing them to make room for bigger, better, more positive thoughts and behaviors, just makes common sense. When Ernest Holmes talks about the dynamics of thought, he stresses that thought does things. A spiritual mind treatment must possess a dynamic quality if it's to be productive of the results desired. When we do these treatments effectively, we are literally speaking from the highest reaches of our own consciousness, affirming and declaring the truth about ourselves. For me, the key phrase there is the highest reaches of my consciousness. That's what I choose to develop and expand on so that my communion with God, Spirit, Divine Intelligence, whatever you call that, so that my communion with that creative energy is clear, is positive, is supportive, and it denotes who I am becoming. Clearing out that which no longer represents that, what I've just described, in my consciousness through the ideas that we've shared here today just makes good sense to me. And so it is.